I'm going to bring you through the thought process that I usually adopt. Okay, so I'm going to bring it to my screen. Usually what I would do is that if let's say I want to analyze a particular condominium, just go to non-landed residential under trends and analysis, click on it, it will bring you to this page. And of course, they will showcase like, some of the very trending projects within different districts. And of course, you can key right in over here. So for example, let's say you want to analyze this particular condominium called Cover Melody. Let's go to District 19 just for a bit. And that will bring you out to the main page that's talking about the entire project. So there's a lot of good tools right here, entire project information. Take note, first thing that I always look at is that I want to make sure that the time period is all reset to all data. So that will then bring me to, instead of the last 5 years by default, I can have accessibility to all the transactions starting from the first day that the property was sold. So take note, if you are hunting for a condominium project that's 99 years, you want to take note of the tenure date rather than the completion date. So there's these two fundamental key differences. So of course, this episode today is for buyers that are hunting for their first condominium for the first time, or maybe you are in the process of upgrading from HDB apartment to a condominium, or this is your first time entering into the non-landed residential space. I think this episode will be fantastic for you. So first thing to note, of course, is the tenure. Tenure, as you can see, 99 years from 2004. It means that the land age starts from 2004. If you look at certain advertisements, for example, on some of the very common portals, they usually do not put in the tenure start date. They will actually put in the completion date. Completion date, we call it the TOP date in short. And of course, in the secondary definition, there's also another date called the CSC, which is the statutory completion date. But by and large, most people, when they talk about completion date, they're talking about the TOP date. That means the date that the first-hand owners got their keys. Usually from TOP to CSC is about a year or maybe a 9 months gap. So we'll just define it as a TOP date for today's context. So basically, the important thing is to look at this, because in certain projects, based on the date that the developer actually bidder or own the land towards the TOP date, there can be a vast difference. Let me give you an example. So you look at Coco Palms, it's a bit different, because if you notice, the land is actually from 2008, but the completion is from 2018. We talk about this in one of our episodes under the PRB Insights, where we talk about the fact that in the whole Pasir Ris central landscape, from Livia all the way to NV Residences, to D-Nest, to Coco Palms, there is actually a history to understand a little bit about why certain projects were launched later, why certain projects, even like, for example, Coco Palms being launched later, but it still performed very well. So we actually talk about that in one of the episodes. I'm going to put the link right down below. I think that's under our PRB Insights. We're going to recall which episode is that. Okay, so first thing is to understand about this. Second thing, let me come back to the Cover Melody, that usually I look at is I want to look at the number of units right here. So this is a very important aspect to look at, because based on our PRB research, my years of experience looking at so many different properties, in totality right now, I think PRB channel will have about 1,900 different episodes, which about 80% are home tours. I personally have filmed more than 1,000 home tours. And with every home tour, usually what we do is that we have a deep dive research. Let me just share with you a little bit about my listing notes here. So I just came back from, of course, today's filming at number 141 West Coast Green. And usually the amount of research that we do is basically right here. And we went through a lot of research to look at all the different price comparisons, and then our guys like to do tables like this. We compare bank valuations, we compare different notes, and of course we want to look at, in terms of comparison, how do we fare in terms of comparative market analysis, as well as bank valuations, as well as certain different matrices. But why is it when we talk about condos and apartments, our number of units important? Is because this translate into the popularity as well as volume. So in one of our latest webinar, we talk about why volume and popularity is very important. I'm going to flash it right here for you. So in episode number 8, we talk about why transactions are so important, because transactions equate to popularity, and popularity tells us where the demand is. So I'm going to play that probably about 30-second, 45-second clip so that you can do a quick recap on what that is. Why do we want to look at transactions? Transactions has already happened, it's the past. But why is transaction important? Because when you see a particular project or particular landed enclave or particular development or particular district with high transactions, we call this high volume. When something has high volume, it means that it has very high popularity. And without sellers, to sell the property, there's no volume, which is no good. But if there's no buyers to buy the property, there's also no volume. So it takes two hands to clap. And what does transactions further tell us? This also tells us that which area and district has more demand. And thus, transactions are driven by demand. But of course, some people might be asking me, hey, Melvin, it is also dependent on supply. Because if nobody wants to sell, there's no transactions. True. That's true. And later, I'm going to share with you through a quiz. But before that, let's look at popularity first. All right? So, what can popularity of a project or a particular enclave tell us, or a particular district? This tells us that where are people buying? Popularity also tells us what type of properties people are buying. Are they buying 3-4 beders? Are they buying District 9 more or District 10 more? Which particular zoning in the landed enclave are they buying? This tells us what exactly people are buying. Is it inter-terraces, condo terraces, semi-D, or detached homes? And we also can get to see where are the areas that sellers are willing to sell. Because if no sellers are willing to sell, there's also no transactions. So one key small little side note is that if you notice a place where sellers are willing to sell, is an indication is that there has been some form of appreciation. And let me come to that later on. I'll just sum it up for everybody, all right? Now, the key function is that when I relate back to this particular quadrant here, this particular box right here, and we'll talk about this portion, where sellers are willing to sell. Now, the rationale is because if nobody wants to sell, even if a lot of people want to buy, there are also no transactions. Okay, so now that we understand why transactions and popularity, they correlate, why is it important that there's demand for a particular project, this helps us to understand why sometimes if you're after sort of a faster appreciation in terms of capital, which of course is not 100% guaranteed because it also depends on so many different factors. Later I'm going to show you our mode analysis because there's 10 different factors and not just volume dictates everything. So don't take just one factor as a key punch point because there's also many other factors. Some projects have high number of volume, there's a high density, there's maybe 1,000 units or 800 units, but they don't perform as well because there's also so many different things that will govern or that will affect the performance of the project. So this is just one, but of course as a general guideline, I usually advise that if you're after 3, 5, 8 years of a better chance of seeing appreciation in terms of your valuation, try to go for units that are above 300 as a first checklist to tick off, okay?